And I see an Elizabeth, but she has John Lehner's photograph. Cleveland, excellent. St. Louis, hi, Tawny. We don't always get folks from St. Louis, but we've just been meeting people from Cornerstone in particular, and it's just made me intensely curious about St. Louis and what the community development situation is like there. Easton, Pennsylvania. I can't say I know where Easton is. What's the closest bigger city to Easton? Oh, Tawny's on the board of Cornerstone. Okay, so you're like in there with all the greats. Like a lot of times, Lisa is in my head as an audience when I'm writing something. It's usually if I want to make sure to, like, would this pass the Lisa test for being reasonable? Hour and a half from Philly, hour and a half from New York. Okay, and the Jersey Shore. Good location, Amy. Hi, everyone. As you're coming in, we're just typing into the chat where we're zooming in from. Home of Lafayette College. Okay. Nick knows the answer to this. Nick, I think I'm going to give you a frequent webinar card pretty soon. In a good, I mean that in the very best sense. I love that you are here a lot. Home of Mr. Rogers. I like the sound of that. Somebody should start, you know, like some kind of a program or foundation for neighborliness in the name of Mr. Rogers, and it should be headquartered there. Let's see. I can't really tell, and Anne can't touch anything or else it'll all collapse. I don't know how many people we have here yet. Probably because, oh, we have just 13. Okay, we had a lot of people, a lot more than usual, registered for today. More like 50 something. And we usually can expect to get about half the people who register to come. But, you know, I wonder, Anne, if we should start sending out reminders. Oh, good. Anne can now. Oh, Elizabeth from Las Vegas. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Marcia. I'll put that on our list for next time.
For some of you may know that I've been digging in a little bit with Alan Malik into looking at middle neighborhoods in cities in the southwestern United States. And Las Vegas is one of the cities we looked at. And it's been really, really interesting. You know, the housing markets out here are so different from the Midwest and the Northeast. And it's just really interesting to see how cities vary. We're working on finishing up that paper, and we'll probably do a webinar to sort of review the findings and release the paper in a couple of months. Okay, I think sounds like we can get started. Let me move that off over here for a moment. So as I said, I am Marcia Nedlin. I'm a member of the National Middle Neighborhood Steering Committee, which is a group of about 20, a mix of practitioners and policymakers and funders, intermediaries, who are kind of the advisory group to the National Community Stabilization Trust, which is the sort of fiscal home and for the middle neighborhoods movement, and also their staff manages the policy and research functions of the national movement. And as we'll see in a minute, the community of practice, which is what Anne and I work on, is supported by NeighborWorks America in partnership with NCST. So we're here to talk about middle neighborhoods. And because we're such a young movement, only about 5 years old, we're still doing a lot of this orientation training for people to understand what do we mean when we say middle neighborhoods and why are we talking about them. So middle neighborhoods, generally speaking, are neither the healthiest neighborhoods in a place, in a city or town, nor are they the most distressed. They're sort of those ones in the middle that don't get a lot of attention paid to them, either by the private market isn't really working for them because their values are often declining, or else they're in danger of gentrifying, nor does philanthropy usually pay that much attention to them because they're not the most distressed. They are often a big source of naturally occurring affordable housing, especially for first-time home buyers, and they can be a major source of municipal tax revenue. So if, as some of us stumbled into kind of looking at some long-term trend lines, we realized that there were a lot of risk factors in these neighborhoods that people weren't really paying attention to that could result in a precarious position long-term for the cities and towns in which they exist, as well as, for the quality of life for people who live there and future generations who might be the first-time buyers there. So today we're going to talk about sort of some of the trends that are affecting them and what people are doing about those trends. And we'll hear from you as well. So here's the image that grabs people usually the quickest. We didn't create this, the Voorhees Center at University of Illinois did this, but this is just a comparison set of maps from 1970 to 2017 for the city of Chicago. And all they did was, color code census tracts this is by individual income. And the point is that in 1970, there were a lot of middle income neighborhoods, those sort of beige, cream colored census tracts. The dark orange is very low income and the dark blue is very high income. And you can see by 2017, there are almost no middle income census tracts left. A good chunk of them gentrified, and they're now that big blob of dark blue that you see up there on the north side. But many, many more of them declined so that they are very low income neighborhoods. And there's many reasons for that. We'll talk about that. But, generally speaking, concerns that sort of a motley crew of researchers or practitioners, I was and am a consultant working with nonprofits, different kinds of folks, had, and we realized we were all getting concerned about the same thing. It caused us to look into this, and we wrote this book, On the Edge, America's Middle Neighborhoods. And then we were promoting the book, and the promotion of that allowed us to meet a lot more people and realize that many other people were also starting to become concerned about middles. Here's just the thing about the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative. As I said, it's about 5 years old, and we have the NCST really is our fiscal agent and manages the policy and research side of what we do and coordinates the steering committee. And then the community of practice is, I never have the right numbers here. I think it's around 800 now practitioners that include nonprofits and city officials, as well as some of the policymakers and researchers. That group is a lightly facilitated networking group, and it's supported by NeighborWorks America. And I and Anne, who is the block that says Middle Neighborhoods, are a couple of the organizers for that, for the community practice. So please do, if you haven't already, go to our website, middleneighborhoods.org, and sign up at the bottom of any page on our website to become a member of the community practice. So a little bit more about characteristics of middle neighborhoods. Generally speaking, they seem to mostly have been built as single-family homes in most cities, although the photo we have here are attached row homes from Baltimore. And they were generally built for families with children, which is one of the risk factors because that's a declining demographic in this country. They tend to still be well more than 50% owner-occupied. But if you look at the long-term trend line, if you look backwards, you can see that that has been declining slowly over time. The housing stock is aging, but it's still in pretty good condition. It doesn't scream distress if you're driving down the street. But as we've dug in more deeply, we realize that it's not competing well for the next generation of home buyers always because it may lack some features and updates that they expect to see. The second bathroom is one of the key ones that we all notice. Property values in these neighborhoods can be in slow decline to maybe they're just flat. In some of our member organizations and their neighborhoods, values may be increasing a little bit, but they're still underperforming against the city or against inflation. Most of our members, with the exception of the last 18 months during COVID, have not seen hyperinflation of housing price as the biggest risk in their middles. More of them see additional decline as the larger risk. And one of the things we've noticed as we start to look more closely at middles is that they tend to be more racially and ethnically diverse and economically diverse, actually, than either their lower income or higher income counterparts. The reason that we're worried about them is that they seem to be faltering in their sustainability. We at least thought that they were kind of self-generating. When a house sold, another owner occupant would buy it and everything would go along fine. And there were effective neighborhood associations and so forth. But if you look closely, that's not really the case. They're losing their ability to reliably attract replacement owner occupants. So the homeownership rate is declining, or to attract the best of the landlord owners. They're losing their ability to generate home values that would support quality maintenance, repairs, and updates without running into appraisal gaps. They're losing their ability to repel the worst of the investors. And nowadays, I was just having a conversation with some folks in Cleveland who've been really tracking their investor activity and finding that the investors, though, are moving up. Like, they're not only buying the lowest priced homes, they're actually willing to buy into the mid-range, which is its own set of problems. As on our occupancy erodes and the residents of the neighborhood become more transient, then your leadership organizations start to suffer as well. And finally, this whole business about delivering home equity to owners and revenue to municipal governments, that is starting to falter as well. And those are the things that we would like to correct. And our premise is that it's possible to intervene in middle neighborhoods now and start to change some of these directions with a much lower investment than if we allow them to deteriorate further and become much more distressed neighborhoods. So let's just take a quick look at what some of the middle neighborhoods of practitioners in our community practice, what the middle neighborhoods look like. These photos represent 4 neighborhoods in Des Moines, Iowa, and their home values range from 80 to 180,000, depending on which neighborhood it is. These photos are from a group of neighborhoods in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, Black middle neighborhoods. And unfortunately, we've really focused our research agenda on Black middle neighborhoods in particular to understand the ways in which they're different and how our sort of theory of change should be different for them. And you can always see that they suffer in terms of the home values. So 60 to 85,000 across 4 greater Chatham neighborhoods. I think that's jumped up since during COVID, but these neighborhoods are really solid and they're really close to downtown. So their values should be much higher than that. Baltimore, these photos are from Bel Air Edison, mostly row homes there. And range from 75 to 150 for a quality townhome. They could go as high for the rare detached home in good shape. They could go as high as 325. That's also a Black middle neighborhood. In Cleveland, this is Old Brooklyn. And these price ranges, the last time we checked, were running from 80 to 140. And St. Louis is another really stark example of the difference in home values between Black and white middle neighborhoods. These photos, I think all of the top 3 photos are from the south side of St. Louis, which is more white, and the bottom photos from the north side, which is more Black. And the price ranges are dramatic. So it can go from 37.8 on the, let's see, on the north side, right, to, you know, all the way up to 180 on the south side. So quite a difference. And we have someone from Cornerstone here. So if you have anything you want to add in the chat about the difference in home values between the Black and white middle neighborhoods in St. Louis, we'd love to hear it. And I think, yes, that's it. So I'd love to just open up the chat and just hear anyone that's with us today talk about, do you think that you are working in a middle neighborhood or do you live in one? And whether you do or don't, does this sort of description of what a middle neighborhood is resonate with you? Do you think you have neighborhoods like that in the communities that you live in? So yeah, anybody recognize some of the trends I was talking about happening in neighborhoods in their community?
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and jump in. Thank you for this. This
Yeah.
is really helpful. I actually live in Old Brooklyn, and so
Oh,
this,
you do? Oh, great. Welcome, Andrew.
so this definitely resonates, and I think that, you know, we are seeing that slip. You know, especially I'll just use my street. It's a historically white working class street, but we are especially starting to see a lot of folks' grandchildren renting their grandparents' houses and not necessarily maintaining them in the way that their grandparents would have. So it's interesting because it's still sort of in the family, but the expectation, especially as incomes have changed over the generations in these families, the expectation of maintenance and appearance isn't necessarily the same it would have been in the 40s and 50s when some of these houses were constructed. So we're starting to see that slow deterioration of one house becomes two, becomes four, and really trying to think about what interventions or tools or supports can we provide to prevent that.
That is fascinating. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the grandchildren are not themselves living in those homes, but they have inherited them and are renting them out to other people.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, so this is a thing that happens for sure. And I think it happens a lot in middle neighborhoods. You know, sometimes they're reluctant landlords, although I doubt that's the case right now because home values are pretty well off, but they're renting because nobody in the family wants to live there, or they haven't sorted out how they're going to resolve the distribution of the value of the home among heirs. But here's you know, I've become more and more interested in the last year in terms of heirs property issues in middle neighborhoods. We did a webinar last year that was fascinating that had several people who are estate attorneys and who have been talking about, there really is this parallel movement that I didn't know about that's trying to get more people of modest means and especially minority households to, you know, do their estate planning so that they don't end up with a house that's maybe occupied by grandkids, or they're about to sell it, but they don't have any way to update the home to get the best price that they could for it. You know, it becomes very complicated. So that's really an interesting challenge. Oh, and I see Anne put that link in there to that webinar. And I'm aware, actually, you know, it's a whole team from Old Brooklyn and from South Euclid who are doing our webinar. When is our webinar? Is it Thursday or is it next week? And I'm losing track here. That's about, you know, sort of figuring out what the impact of investors are on middle neighborhoods. It's going to be a really interesting webinar. Okay, anybody else? You can just type into the chat whether this sounds familiar to you or not. Or I'd especially love to know if it doesn't resonate with you. But I'm going to assume that it does if nobody says anything. Okay, we'll go on. Feel free to continue posting in the chat. So let's talk about a couple of these trends that are working against middle neighborhoods. You know, the middle class is shrinking, period, and that's a big one. You know, the polarization of incomes, people are either getting richer or they're getting poorer, and there isn't much in the middle. And we're really losing the share of census tracts that are middle income in this country. There's that same map again. Suburbs are just, they're a point of competition for cities, and further out suburbs are a competition for first-ring suburbs. Many of our community of practice members are working in first-ring suburbs who are seeing exactly the same kind of problems as middle neighborhoods inside cities. So, you know, as tastes change in terms of what first-time homebuyers want, you know, they go for the newer stuff because it more closely matches them. And we don't have a terrific system in this country for making sure that our housing stock gets updated along the way to keep up with the changing taste of home buyers. You know, just a general decline of home ownership rates across the country. That's been happening in legacy cities, which are mostly, you know, northeastern cities like these. Here are 1, 2, 3, 4 of them represented here. That decline in home ownership rate is higher than normal. The whole aging housing stock, I've talked about that a lot already, what people want versus what's there. So what are we doing about it? We tend to think of the work in terms of research, policy, and practice. In the research area, we do have this new mapping tool that, you know, if you want to start a conversation with anyone in your community about where your middle neighborhoods are and what kind of shape they're in, you could, as a first take on that, go to our mapping tool and just, there are a number of different screens you can choose from. 80 to 120% of median household income is one range. And then you can choose that to be within the city, or excuse me, within the MSA probably, or the region. Maybe it's the city, the region, or national. Those are your three choices. And so if you're a very low income city like Cleveland or Newark, you're probably going to choose city median. I think in Cleveland, if you chose regional, you probably wouldn't find many middle neighborhoods at all. And we also drop down, I think, as low as to 60 to 100% of area median. So you might want to play around and switch what ranges and what comparison you're using, just to start to look at where are these middles so that you know what they are, and you can start to do a little more data collection on them and find out what's going on. Alan Malik has been doing a lot of research for us, specifically focused on Black middle neighborhoods and legacy city neighborhoods. And we have past webinars that focus in on his research on Black middle neighborhoods in particular, that you can go back and look at. And we're working right now on NCST in particular on pulling together a program that would put resources directly into the hands of practitioners in Black middle neighborhoods that we're going to go out and start fundraising for pretty soon. And then we have researchers, you know, on the steering committee and in the COP. In terms of policy, I think it's just, the more we go on, we're fortunate to be able to learn about or engage with more and more local governments who are seeing that they need to pay attention, not just to the most distressed neighborhoods in their community, but they really need to have a strategy about their middles as well, if they don't want them to become the next set of distressed neighborhoods. So they're starting to enact some policy stuff that's beneficial. And, you know, one of the big pieces of legislation that we're all really interested in is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, NHIA, which has its own website if you want to know more about it. I think, you know, that all this stuff changes day by day, but I think right now that it's in the Build Back Better bill that's still, you know, being kicked around. And it would just be a federal tax credit to generate equity investment for development and renovation to 1 to 4 family housing in neighborhoods where appraisal gap is an issue, which is middle neighborhoods and lower income neighborhoods as well. I think right now, the idea is that it would go up to 120% of AMI would be sort of how they would define neighborhoods. That would make a big difference in terms of having the capital available to make some of these upgrades that need to happen. So who's working there? Nonprofits, intermediaries, neighborhood associations. I wish I had a better way to tap into them, except other than stumbling into them one by one, because I suspect that many middle neighborhoods don't actually have nonprofits working in them. What they have are neighborhood associations. And we don't really have, I haven't found a really efficient way to access them more nationally. Financial institutions, other private sector, and certainly municipal government is becoming more interested in working in middles. The funding sources, may or may not include any CDBG. I mean, one of the characteristics of middles that's troubling is that there are no funds that are earmarked for them usually. And we certainly don't want to take one dime away from the CDBG, which is already not funded well enough for more distressed neighborhoods. So what we see is a little more general revenue, especially in first ring suburbs. In occasional cases, we'll see like Des Moines, they are using sales tax proceeds. They just passed an increase in their sales tax that's helping to fund some of their work so that it doesn't have income limits. Of course, private loan capital is a really important tool in doing home improvements. And foundations, though, are probably our number one funder for the stuff that really needs to not have an income restriction and is really important little leverage point to make other things work. What are we going for? As I mentioned before, we're going for the opposite of the risk factors. We want to create or recreate the sustainable real estate market. And by that, we mean these neighborhoods can again successfully attract replacement owner occupants and other neighborhood friendly buyers. By that, I mean the best of the investors, and not so many investors that there are no properties left for owner occupants. That's a thing where it's a new problem that's happening in the last few years. And really, it kind of started with the foreclosure crisis, but it's really heated up recently. We want to see some home values that are strong enough that they actually support quality maintenance, repairs, and updates. So in other words, you can replace the roof when it needs it. You can update the kitchen and bathroom that hasn't been updated since 1975. And you can do it with a home improvement loan, home equity loan. And it is not the case that your after rehab appraised value would be insufficient to support that loan. We want to see engaged residents again, exercising stewardship over the neighborhood. We definitely want to see mixed income choices. That's one of the hallmarks and big benefits, I think, of middle neighborhoods right now, is that there's quite a diversity of incomes in a middle. They tend not to be uniformly, everyone earns exactly 80 to 120 AMI, but there'll be a mix across the neighborhood. And there's no doubt that many of our neighborhoods are at risk of gentrification. So that's something we really have to watch out for. And those places that have stronger markets, a lot of their strategies have more to do with protecting against gentrification. And finally, we want to make sure that these neighborhoods are places that can deliver home equity to households who buy a home there, and it can help to close that wealth gap and between Black and white households, and also to start to protect and further the intergenerational wealth building that happens through homeownership, and that these neighborhoods can reliably deliver revenue to municipalities. So we sort of have three big buckets for the kinds of strategies people do that are most common. This is not everything that people do, but there's always a lot of work around activating, supporting residents, because that, there may be neighborhood associations. It's not unusual to find neighborhood associations that have sort of lost some of their leadership and need to be revamped and get going again. Although in other middle neighborhoods, we find that the neighborhood associations are like absolutely amazing, and they're almost operating like a staffed nonprofit. And then there's a whole bucket around the housing stock and the curb appeal. So, that could include a variety of things. Either you're about preserving affordability, or you may be lending to lead appraisals up. so that there's less of an appraisal gap for people to start to make their home improvements, and just getting people working on seeing their neighborhood with fresh eyes and really updating the curb appeal. And then there's a lot of image recreation over here in bucket 3 that has to do with rebranding and promoting that neighborhood to sort of freshen its appeal for the next generation of home buyers, and always doing that carefully so that you're preserving existing culture and leadership. This is just an illustration of how we found over and over again that usually you can increase the value of a home, of a 1-bath home, enough to cover the investment by adding a half bath or an additional bath. And that can make all the difference in terms of the ability of that property to attract a home buyer the next time it goes on the market, and to perhaps put it into a price range that is no longer attractive to the worst investors. I encourage you to go check out Invest DSM. It's the nonprofit that was created by the city and county, Polk County and City of Des Moines, to really funnel resources into their middle neighborhoods with the express purpose of sort of reversing the trend of losing all of their middle income home buyers to the suburbs. So they're doing a lot of renovation work, and they're making resources available for developers, both private and nonprofit, homeowners. It's a really very interesting program. This is an example of some of the identity work or branding work. This is a Triangle neighborhood in Rochester, New York. Really reaching out to realtors, the Merchants Association, getting the Merchants Association together to do some joint promotion. And then, other strategies as needed. There's a lot of retail district improvement that happens among the practitioners in the community practice. And it's really interesting and great work. There's school marketing, landlord investor strategies are starting to happen. I wish there were more of them, but we're working on it. And then of course, always safety strategies. So again, here's the middle neighborhoods community of practice. This is what we are. Here's another slide I have to fix. It's more than 800 people now. We'd love for you to join us. We do a regular webinar series every month of a new topic that's usually some of our practitioners talking to everybody else about what they're doing. And then we, every month or two, we also do this orientation webinar. We are really happy to customize an orientation webinar like this one for any audience that you have in your local community. We do that regularly. We've done it, say, for a group of emerging developers that were being trained by LISC. We've done it for a National Association of Housing Counselors, for a foundation board of directors. We just did one for the city council and planning department of a city, an East Coast city. So we want to spread the word, and we're happy to do that for you at no charge to help you engage others in conversation. So let me stop talking and open it up to see if there are any questions. You could put them in the chat, or you could unmute yourself. Any questions, or anybody just want to talk about what they're doing in middle neighborhoods? Do we still have our St. Louis person here from Cornerstone? And if we do, I wonder if she might unmute herself and tell us a little bit about Cornerstone and what they're doing. She might not still be here. Okay. Well, if there are not any questions, then we'll just wrap up a little early. I hope that perhaps many of you were here to learn a little bit more about middle neighborhoods before you join our upcoming webinar on investors in middle neighborhoods. And I know I have a couple of repeat customers, which I always love to see. So thanks everybody for coming out and sharing your time with us. let us know if there's any way we can help you spread the word or help you engage others in conversation about middles in your community. And we'll see you one of these days at another webinar. Take care, everyone.